During this class, we're going to discuss the different facets of cultural competence, look at our own biases and implications in the workplace, but we're also going to talk about multi-generations in the workplace. E.B. Taylor is considered the father of cultural anthropology. He defines culture this way: culture or civilization. Culture or civilization, taken in its broad ethnographic sense, is that complex whole which includes knowledge, belief, art, morals, law, custom, and any other capabilities and habits acquired by man as a member of society. A more current definition that we might want to think about is from the Office of Minority Health, the Federal Office of Minority Health, is, quote, the thoughts, communications, actions, customs, beliefs, values, and institutions of racial, ethnic, religious, or social groups. Notice there are two terms that occurred in both of those definitions. And I think we need to talk about both of them as we talk about cultural diversity. One is race. Race is defined as a person's physical characteristics and or genetic makeup. Although we've been conditioned to see different races based on these physical characteristics, science has revealed to us that the differences among the races is only about 6%. My reference for that, if you want to look it up, is the American Anthropological Association Statement on Race from 1998. Most physical variations in races, 94%, occur within the same race. Essentially, we are all the same. Now, ethnicity is a group of humans whose members identify with each other on the basis of a boundary that distinguishes them from other groups. And that can be found, that reference can be found in our text. When we're talking about cultural competence, we're talking about a skill in the workplace that represents a set of congruent behaviors, attitudes, and policies that come together in the system or the agency you're working in, or among professionals, such as human service professionals, to work effectively in cross-cultural situations, to work effectively with different ethnicities in the workplace. Here's a second definition: professional work in a way that is congruent with the behavior and expectations that members of a distinctive culture recognize as appropriate among themselves. We'll be talking more about this as we get into discussions of educational supervision and administrative supervision. Mark Williams, in his book, The 10 Lenses, says that we all look at the world through our own set of spectacles, perceptual filters that comprise what we have been taught and what we have seen, heard, and experienced. A person may use a different filter depending on the situation that they encounter. But he also says, as this slide indicates, that as you understand why you have the spectacles, the filters that you have, and why others might have them, you increase the possibility of building bridges, managing conflict, and finding common ground in cross-cultural situations. So that's why you should try to understand your lenses, your filters. It helps you understand others, it helps you respect others, and it will help you get along with others in the workplace and in life. So the questions that we need to ask ourselves are, what lenses about race, ethnicity, and culture am I using? How did I develop them? And am I using them from a strengths perspective? First thing I want to talk about are legacies. Legacies are historic events, powerful ones, experienced by our ancestors, our families, sometimes our communities, that still influence us today. You can probably think about some from your own ethnic community background, but slavery. If you're an African American, slavery and the whole concept of slavery has had a profound influence through the generations. The internment of the Japanese in World War II because of our fear. The Civil Rights March. The Trail of Tears, when we moved the Cherokee Nation from Georgia to Oklahoma, has had a profound impact on our nation's first people. And if you're part of the LGBT community, Stonewall, the riots in the 1960s, caused by police raids of gay bars, has had a profound impact. So depending upon our history and the history of our ancestors, we may have a different mental picture of these kinds of events. We'll talk more about these legacies and experiences when we talk about multi-generational people in the workplace too. Now the next thing we need to consider are the layers of our life. It's our own life, our own situation. What color are we? What gender? What sexual orientation? How old are we? What's our marital status? What's our socioeconomic status? What's our educational level? What kind of profession are we in? Most of us prioritize these layers. Let's say you prioritize gender and you're a woman. Then the legacies that correspond to gender may play a role in your life. The suffragette movement, equal pay issues that continue to today, the glass ceiling. All of these might be things that you focus on. You might be a woman who doesn't focus on gender, but rather a woman who focuses on her marital status. So let's look at the next set of slides. In his book, The 10 Lenses, Williams talks about, obviously, 10 lenses. And the third block in the top here that says lens should say layers. So we're going to look at these very broadly for just a few moments. Then I'm going to take a look at my lens in a little more detail for you. So the assimilationist says that all races and cultures who come to this country should speak English, accept our values, our behaviors, and our lifestyles. So the layer that's important, according to Williams, or maybe not important, but the layer that comes to the top of the list for the assimilationist is your nationality. For the colorblind person, it's personality and character. And the colorblind person says that all people should be treated as equals, assessed and valued based on their unique talents, their personality, their character. The culture centrist says that their mission in life is to preserve and protect their own culture, their own community. The elitist takes a look at socioeconomic class as the top layer and says that those who are most advantaged in terms of money are best equipped to assume leadership roles. The integrationist wants to talk about it. The integrationist does not require a person to leave their culture behind. They want to share, they want to talk, they want to explain differences. The meritocratist, what matters most is an individual's ability and achievement, not the color of their skin, not their socioeconomic class, etc. The multiculturalist respects diversity and thinks the world would be dull if everyone looked and spoke and behaved the same way. The seclusionist opposes all aspects of integration where his or her group is dominant, of course. The transcendent believes that people are bound together on a spiritual quest. So spirituality is the guide there. And then there's the victim, caretaker, that minorities have little control over their destiny. Now, I said I would talk a little bit about mine. My lens, when I took the test, came across as transcendent. And this is what Williams says about the transcendent. The transcendent believes people are bound together on a spiritual quest that involves transcending their individual lives to recognize the universal human potential. Williams' book talks about professions, talks about the shadows as well as the strengths of each of these kind of lenses. So, as an employee, supposedly, the transcendent believes he or she is serving a higher purpose, isn't good in top-down organizations, doesn't like hidden agendas, and doesn't like one-upmanship. Of course, I like to think that that's how I am. Good professions for the transcendent would be human services and teaching, or any of the helping professions. So perhaps I found my calling. The strength of the transcendent is that we promote tolerance. But our shadows, but we have them, our shadows can leave us impatient with and dismissive when we think that others are stuck in their victim role or stuck in not understanding the cultural differences. So I would refer you to the book The 10 Lenses by Mark Williams, Capital Books, 2001, if you want to look into this further. Oh, I'm not sure I'm going to open this up now, but I urge you to open this site up. It's a short paper, and I'd like you to read it on culture. Of particular note, I think, are the list of cultural universals. And among them, I just picked out about 5 of them from the list at this site. Communicating with a verbal language. Using age and gender to classify people. Having a concept of privacy. Body ornamentation. And a way of making community decisions. And there's several others in this list that I think you'll find interesting. So, what professional requirements and standards make it so that we even want to discuss cultural competence? Well, the National Organization of Human Services has a code of ethics that I refer to in my classes. It is a little broader in terms of the scope of human services than the National Association of Social Workers, although it is very consistent with their code of ethics. And within that code are standards regarding the professional's responsibility to the public and to society. Standard number 10 is an anti-discrimination standard. Standard 11 says, human service professionals are knowledgeable about their culture and communities within which they practice. They respect the cultures and beliefs of individuals and groups. Standard 26. Human service professionals seek the training, experience, education, and supervision necessary to ensure their effectiveness in working with culturally diverse individuals based on age, ethnicity, culture, race, ability, gender, language, religion, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, nationality, or other historically oppressed groups. So there are indeed requirements of the profession to which you aspire that require you to be culturally competent. So what are the personal characteristics of a person who is culturally competent? First, they're self-reflective. We spend a lot of time in this class talking about ourselves and personal awareness. Very important to be self-reflective. They're knowledgeable about the strengths of diversity, how diversity can help in the workplace. They're comfortable with differences. They have a commitment to justice, one of the human service values we discuss in this class. They welcome learning, why we talk about the learning organization. And they have a commitment to organizational growth. Again, remember our discussions about the learning organization. So, what are the core knowledge and skills? The history, traditions, customs of a client population. We are getting more diverse in Maine. If we're working with the First Nations people, we need to know what some of the history is in the treatment of Maine citizens. In child welfare, we know that we've just finished a reparation study in Maine in 2013, 2014, because of all the children who were taken from their families. We need to understand, if we're in the child welfare system, for example, that history. And we need to know the current traditions and customs of, let's say, the Passamaquoddies. The etiology and existence of social problems within the client population. We would want, I think, if we're working with Somalis or Sudanese, to understand the civil war that has taken place in Sudan over many years. The agency's history with the population. Does the agency have a respected history of working appropriately with this population? A familiarity with the community. Communication skills with the population. And conflict management. How is conflict perhaps solved differently in different cultures? When we talk about conflict management later in the semester, we'll look at this. So one of the roles of the supervisor, of course, is to model behavior. So how can supervisors model cultural competence so that their workers become culturally competent? Being open to the discussion of issues, managing sensitive issues well, promoting training in cultural competence, effective use of community resources, and creating a learning environment. Supervisors need to challenge assumptions. They need to encourage the expression of emotions and validate that there can be conflicting emotions about cultural differences. And the methods that can be used certainly include planned unit discussions about different cultural issues and exploration of our own cultural backgrounds, our own lenses, our own legacies. I would like you to read this article, and you'll see in the assignment section an assignment about it. This is just a fun and interesting TED Talk by Sarah Jones, and I urge you to take a peek. It takes about 20 minutes. Very interesting. On to a discussion of the generations in the workplace. In some ways, this connects, of course, because of culture and the differences between and among the generations. Clearly, there have always been different generations in the workplace. But today, perhaps more than ever, we have 4 different generations that span a significant amount of time. We have millennials, born between 1981 and 1999. We have Generation Xers, born between 1965 and 1980. Boomers, 46 to 64. And Traditionalists, born 1930 to 1945. Just as people in different communities and different cultures experienced different events, so did these people in these different generations experience some significant historical events, both social and cultural. And I just wanted to talk about a few of them. I took a peek at a historical. Because I don't remember all of these. Between 1930 and 1945, for the Traditionalists, some of the things they experienced were, of course, Hitler, Pearl Harbor, the New Deal, and from a cultural perspective, in case anybody's interested, the cheeseburger was created. But one of the things that I found interesting as I looked at it was that in 1939, refugees from Nazi Germany, immigrants, refugees, were refused entry into the United States and Europe as they tried to flee that country. Then we have the Boomers, 1946 to 1964. Joe McCarthy and his angry and pervasive rants against communists. The Korean War. Polio vaccine was first, invented, I guess. It wasn't discovered, it was invented. We had the Freedom Riders. The Berlin Wall was built. We had the first man in space. Legos were introduced. In 1965 to 1980, we had Vietnam. The first heart transplant took place during that period of time. The first man on the moon. The VCR was introduced. The Walkman was introduced. And then, for the millennials, what they've experienced, first women in space, the explosion of the Challenger, airliners shot down, Tiananmen Square, Columbine, and Harry Potter. very different experiences for these generations. But, these experiences may have been experienced differently, depending on the person. For the Vietnam War, for example, some people served, some people protested, some people left the country, some people lost a loved one. So even though generations may have had the same events, they may have experienced them differently and have come out of that event with a different outlook. So, how does age matter in the workplace? First of all, depending upon your age, might make a difference in how you want to be involved. You want to work part-time. Is it a second career, or is it just kind of filling in some of the gaps of retirement? The literature tells us that age matters because different age groups feel differently about being valued in the workplace. HR policies might have to be different for a person who is taking care of an elderly parent, or a person who has child care needs. And workplace relationships can be different. So I want to think about age. Here's another way to think about age. We're going to think about it in 4 ways. Chronological age, which is a person's actual age. Think about the work you've done with Erikson's developmental theories, how we change as we go through stages, what happens if we miss a stage. The generation, the entire body of individuals born and living at about the same time, we've just talked about them. The life stage, which is the phase of life you're in. And your career stage, your professional stage. And some of these stages are changing as time has gone on. Generally, we thought that between the ages of 10 and 18 or 20 or so, people would be in school. Then there would be the kind of the partnering stage and the child-rearing stage from 20 or so to 40 or so, 45 or 50. And then there would be the retirement stage, the professional stage, of course, the maintenance stage where you're working in your profession, and then the retirement stage. But you can see how, if you think about your own experiences, this is changing. The retirement stage has been pushed up. It's much later now. And people are going back to work. That's why we have boomers and even traditionalists in the workforce. And elder caregiving has become something we do in our 70s and 80s as people are living in their 90s up to 100 years old. So these stages, and professional, people are taking on a new profession. Jobs are not as secure as they used to be. So in some ways, the reason I want to talk about these multi-generations in the workforce is that together with different cultures and different ethnicities and different ages, we have a very complex workforce. And supervisors need to pay attention to this complexity. I'm going to refer you to the Boston College. Boston College has an aging and work study. And this study has a lot of additional information about aging in the workforce. So I'd like to refer you here, and we'll talk more about this as the semester goes on.